I'm Lisa Hendrick, 48, and I'm a Rear Admiral in the United States Navy, the Senior Naval Advisor to the Secretary of Defense. For 27 years, I built a career at sea while my father introduced me to his Marine buddies as the daughter who works in a Pentagon office. But when an Army colonel cornered me at a Pentagon podium and tried to physically move me off it before a press briefing, I made a choice that changed everything. Have you ever been dismissed by someone who decided what you were before he looked at you? If so, tell me your story in the comments. You're not alone. Before I get into what happened, let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever had to stand up for yourself after being wronged, hit that like button and subscribe. The summer I was 8, my father carried my 4-year-old brother on his shoulders through a backyard at Camp Lejeune while I dried glasses at the kitchen sink. It was the kind of small, ordinary moment that a child files away and only understands 20 or 30 years later. 3 Marine officers were in the living room. They were drinking beer. They were talking about my brother. Sebastian had started saluting our father when he came home from work, and the men in the living room thought this was the funniest, most promising thing they had ever seen. I was in the kitchen with my mother. I was drying the wine glasses because she had asked me to, and because I wanted to be near her, and because I had figured out by then that the kitchen was where the women in our family lived during family parties. My mother was a quiet woman who had been a school teacher before she married. She knew how to be in a room without taking up space. She had taught me how. Through the doorway, I could see the men. My father lifted Sebastian onto his shoulders. The men cheered. I learned early that there were 2 kinds of children in my father's house, the kind he saw, and me. My father was a Marine Corps major at the time, and at that moment, in the summer of 1985, he was already the man he would still be when he retired as a colonel 17 years later. He believed in service. He believed in his sons. He believed deeply and uncomplicatedly that the boys carried the future and the girls supported them. My mother was Catherine. She loved my father the way women of her generation loved men of his generation, with patience and with a quiet ability to put her own life into smaller and smaller corners of his. I do not say any of this with anger. I say it because it is the architecture of the story I am telling. When I was 12, my middle school selected me to give the closing reading at the graduation ceremony. My mother sat in the front row in a blue dress I had not seen before. My father was not there. He was at a Marine Corps birthday ball planning meeting that ran long. After the ceremony, I sat with my mother in the parking lot for 40 minutes waiting for him. "He'll be sorry, honey," she said. "He always means to come." "I know, Mom," I said. She always said it that way. He always means to come. It was not a lie. He always meant to. The lie was the second sentence, the one she did not say, the one about whether he came. I did not cry. By the time I was 12, I had stopped expecting that he would be there for the school things. I had stopped expecting it gracefully, the way a child learns to stop expecting Christmas magic without anyone telling her the trick. 6 months later, I was 13, homesick from school on a Thursday afternoon. The Gulf War was on the television. I had the sound very low. I was watching footage of smart bombs threading down ventilation shafts in Baghdad. I was watching naval task forces launching tomahawks from destroyers in the Persian Gulf. I was not watching the Marines. I was watching the ships. My father walked through the room on his way to the kitchen. He did not stop. He said without looking at the television, "You should see how proud Sebastian is. He says he's going to be a Marine when he grows up." I did not look up. He never asked what I was watching, so he never knew. If you asked my father today when I had decided to join the Navy, he would tell you it had been my senior year of high school when I received my appointment to the United States Naval Academy. That is the version of the story he remembers. The version that is true is that I had decided when I was 13, watching destroyers in the Persian Gulf, with the sound very low so my father would not notice and tell me I had picked the wrong service. I was 17 when my guidance counselor pulled me into her office in October of 1994. She told me her office was prepared to recommend me for a Naval Academy nomination. She asked if I had told my parents. I had not. She asked why. "Because if I tell my dad," I said, "he'll explain why it would have been better at the Marine Corps Academy. There isn't one. And he'll still find a way to be disappointed." She laughed. She thought I was joking. I did not correct her. My acceptance letter arrived in June of 1995. My father read it standing in the driveway in shorts and a polo shirt, with grass stains on the knees. He read it once. He folded it. He handed it back to me. He said, "It's a good school." He went inside. A few minutes later, my brother came out in his soccer uniform. He was 14. He said, "Dad says you're going away." "Yes," I said. "Cool," he said. That was the longest conversation I had with my father about the United States Naval Academy. He said it was a good school. I had been hoping he would say it was a good choice. I sat on the front step for a long time after he had gone inside. The acceptance letter was creased from his fingers. I folded it once, carefully. I put it in the back pocket of my shorts. I walked to the bus stop at the end of the street and sat on the bench. I was not waiting for a bus. I was waiting for nothing in particular. The afternoon was very warm. There is a version of this story where my father is a villain. I want to say plainly now that I do not believe he was. He was a man who had been raised by his own father to believe that the way you loved your children was to make them tough. He believed in the Marine Corps the way some men believe in a church. He had been raised in turn to believe that his daughter would grow up, marry well, and have children, and that his son would carry the future. He did not invent any of this. He inherited it. The cost of his inheritance, however, was paid by his daughter. I drove with my mother to Annapolis on a July morning in 1995. My father did not come. He had a thing at the base. My mother kissed me on the cheek at the gate and said, "He's proud of you, sweetheart. He just doesn't know how to say it." It was the kindest lie she ever told me. I marched into the yard. I took the oath. I had my hair cut short. I learned to call myself by my last name. I called my mother that night from a payphone in Bancroft Hall. She had been crying. My father, she said, had been quiet at dinner. "He's proud, Lisa," she said. "He's just quiet." "I know, Mom," I said. That night, I lay in my rack and listened to the sounds of a 4,000-person dormitory settling for the first time. I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel small. I felt, for the first time I could remember, exactly where I was supposed to be. The years after the Naval Academy went the way the years go for everyone in uniform, slowly until they were suddenly behind me. I commissioned out of Annapolis as an ensign in May of 1999. My mother was at the ceremony with a bouquet of supermarket flowers. My father was 400 miles away in a hotel ballroom in Northern Virginia, at a Marine Corps reception honoring a friend's son who had commissioned Marine the day before. He had explained in the weeks beforehand that the conflict was unavoidable and that my mother would be there to take the pictures. For years afterward, he told the story that he had been at my commissioning. He had not been. He had been 400 miles away, drinking with a Marine general's father. I did not correct him when I heard him tell it. By then I had learned that correcting him cost more than letting him be wrong. My first ship was a guided missile destroyer based out of Norfolk. I deployed to the Persian Gulf in 2002 as a lieutenant junior grade, and again in 2003 as a lieutenant. The second deployment was the opening phase of the Iraq War. My ship was on Tomahawk strike duty off the coast of Kuwait. I was the Combat Information Center officer. I worked 14-hour watches for 19 consecutive days. I had not slept in a real bed for a month. On the 11th day of the war, in the few minutes I had between watches, I checked my email. There was one new message from my father. It said, "Saw Sebastian's OCS graduation video. Marine Corps strong. Thinking of you. Dad." I read it 3 times. Sebastian had graduated from officer candidate school the weekend before. My father had driven up to Quantico to be there, thinking of me. I closed the laptop. I did not reply. I had been at war for 11 days. He had been at officer candidate school graduation for a weekend. And he was thinking of me. In July of 2005, the summer after Sebastian commissioned second lieutenant in the Marine Corps, my father hosted a barbecue at the family home in Jacksonville. He was 3 years retired by then. He had filled the backyard with retired Marines and the kitchen with the wives, including my mother, who were making potato salad and trying to be invisible. I was on shore duty in San Diego, 28 years old, a lieutenant on my way to my second sea command tour. I had flown across the country to be at the party. I came out of the kitchen with a paper plate and walked over to my father, who was standing among a half-dozen retired Marines drinking beer. "This is Sebastian," my father said to the Marines, his arm around my brother. The next generation, the one carrying the colors." The Marines laughed. They shook Sebastian's hand. They clapped him on the shoulder. I stood off to the side with my plate. After a while, my father noticed me. He did not introduce me by name. He said to the gathered Marines, without looking at me, "She's at the Pentagon now, doing some paperwork thing." I was not at the Pentagon. I was on shore duty in San Diego on my way to a Sea Command tour. The Marines nodded politely at me. One of them, an older man with a Vietnam-era Marine Raider tattoo on his forearm, looked at me for a long moment and then looked back at my father with an expression I would only learn to read 15 years later. He saw something. My father did not. I went back into the kitchen. I helped my mother peel eggs. He had never asked, so he had never known. So the story he told was the story he had made up. I made lieutenant commander in 2009. I made commander in 2014. By the time I was 37, I had been a destroyer's Combat Information Center officer, operations officer, executive officer, and commanding officer. I had earned a master's degree at the Naval Postgraduate School. I had spent 2 years on the Joint Staff. I had been forward deployed to Japan twice. I had not married. I had not had children. I had not told my father any of this in detail. He did not ask. I called home from a payphone in Yokosuka one afternoon in the autumn of 2014, just before I went forward to take command of my second destroyer. I wanted to tell him I was going to command. My mother answered. "Honey," she said, "your father just stepped out. Can he call you back?" "I'm going forward, Mom," I said. "Command at sea. Tell him I love him." "I will, sweetheart. He's so proud." "I know," I said. I did not. My mother had been protecting my father from the consequences of his own attention for 37 years. I never asked her to stop. In January of 2020, the year I was 42, the Navy's Public Affairs Office put me on the cover of one of their monthly magazines. I was in service khakis on the bridge wing of my flagship. The magazine had a circulation of about 30,000, mostly within the fleet. A Marine acquaintance of my father's, a retired colonel, saw the cover, recognized me, and mailed the magazine to my father with a note that said, "Max, your kid is doing well." The magazine sat on the coffee table at my parents' house for 6 months. My father did not open it. That summer, my brother, by then a Marine major, drove down to Jacksonville for Father's Day. He took a picture of the unopened magazine on the coffee table. He sent it to me with a text that said, "He'll get to it." I replied, "He won't." He did not respond. I had stopped being angry about it. Anger requires expectation. I had run out of expectation somewhere off the coast of Yokosuka in 2014, and I had never gone back to look for it. The story actually begins on a Tuesday in late August of 2025, in the press briefing room of the Pentagon, at 1400 hours on a hot afternoon. I was 48 years old. I had been a Rear Admiral, upper half, for 8 months. I had been the senior naval advisor to the Secretary of Defense for the same 8 months. My desk was in the E-ring. My title was longer than my desk. I ran the Indo-Pacific strategy portfolio for the Secretary, which meant I briefed him daily, I briefed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs weekly, and I briefed the press on his behalf any time the topic touched the Western Pacific. I had stood at the Pentagon press briefing room podium 9 times in 5 months. I knew where the bad lights were. I knew which reporter would lead. I was at the podium that afternoon 20 minutes early in service dress blues, 2 stars on the shoulder boards. Surface Warfare Officer pin above 3 rows of ribbons. The ribbons were the ribbons of a quiet career at sea, a Defense Meritorious Service Medal, a Joint Service Commendation Medal, 2 Navy Achievement Medals, the expeditionary ribbons for the Persian Gulf and the Western Pacific. Nothing that would mean anything to a stranger. I had a sheaf of note cards in my left hand. I was reviewing the top question I expected from the wire service reporter in the second row. My aide, a Marine Corps major named Reagan Thatcher, was at the side table fixing the seal on the front of the podium because it had been crooked all morning. There were a dozen members of the press in the room, 3 camera crews, a producer checking white balance, and a young Defense Department photographer in the corner. I had done this 9 times. I was calm. The double door at the back of the briefing room opened. A man walked in. He was tall. He was in Army service dress blues. He was a colonel, his infantry branch insignia on his lapels, 3 rows of ribbons of his own. He was 50 years old. I did not yet know him. His name was Colonel Roland Halloran. He was the Chief of Legislative Affairs at the Department of Defense, a job he had held for 14 months. He had been a battalion commander in Afghanistan and a brigade operations officer. He had spent the last decade in capital-adjacent staff jobs. He believed himself, in the unconscious way that men of a certain background believe such things, to be exactly the kind of officer who belonged in the room. He believed the secretary's briefer that afternoon was a tall Air Force major he played squash with on Thursdays at the Pentagon Athletic Club. He had walked the 400 feet from his office to the briefing room, expecting to find her at the podium. Instead, he saw a woman in service dress blues he did not recognize. He did not register the 2 stars on the shoulder boards. He did not register the surface warfare officer pin. He looked at my hair, which was brown and pinned in a low knot. He looked at my face. He decided what he was looking at. He had lived inside the assumption that women at Pentagon podia were press handlers for so long that he saw one now, even when he was looking at a flag officer. He walked straight toward the podium. He did not break stride. He came around the side and put his left hand on the front of it. He put his right hand lightly at my elbow. "Move aside, sweetheart," he said. His voice was a brisk, friendly voice. He had probably said the same words to 100 Pentagon staffers in 14 months without anything ever going wrong. "The secretary's briefer is coming in. Press handlers, stage downstairs, right? Right!" It was the right. That did it. Reagan's head came up at the side table. I saw it in my peripheral vision. She set the seal down. She did not move toward me. She had been my aide for 14 months. She had been a Marine for 15 years. She understood what was happening before he did. She also understood, professionally, that this was not her room to interrupt. I did not move. I did not look at him. I looked at my note cards. "Colonel," I said in a tone that I had not raised, because I had learned over 27 years that the loudest thing in a room is often the woman who refuses to raise her voice. "Take your hand off me." He laughed. It was the laugh of a senior officer who had decided this was a teaching moment with a junior staffer. He tightened his grip on my elbow, half a step. "Come on, sweetheart," he said. "Up, let's go. The press handler's table is downstairs. You do not want to be here when the secretary walks in. Trust me. Out, now." He had not looked at my shoulder boards once. Not once. He had looked at my hair, and he had decided what I was. The double door at the back of the room opened again. The Secretary of Defense walked in. His name was Mason Hartwell. He was 63 years old. He had been a 4-star Army general before the president had asked him to come out of retirement to run the department. He had been in rooms like this since the Reagan administration. He had a way of walking into a room that was not loud, exactly, but that was the kind of walking a room felt before it saw. He came in flanked by his chief of staff and a member of his Secret Service detail. He saw the podium. He saw me at the podium. He saw the Army colonel with his hand on my arm. He stopped dead. His chief of staff stopped behind him. The Secret Service stopped. The press registered, in a slow, layered wave, that the Secretary of Defense had stopped moving in the doorway of a room he had come to brief. Cameras pivoted. White balance lights blinked. The young photographer in the corner raised his camera by reflex. Hartwell's voice was very low and very clear. He had been a general for a long time. He had learned somewhere in Korea or Bosnia or Iraq that the worst thing a man in charge could do in a room was raise his voice. "Colonel," he said. Halloran turned. His right arm was still half raised at my elbow. He saw the Secretary of Defense in the doorway. His face changed. Hartwell raised his right hand. He extended his index finger. He pointed directly at me. "She's my Admiral," he said. "She runs Indopacom strategy for me. Step away." Halloran's hand dropped like a stone. He stepped back 1 full pace. He stepped back another. He did not say anything. He could not speak. The press was not moving. Reagan was not moving. The Chief of Staff was not moving. The Secret Service was not moving. I had not moved. I was still looking at my note cards. Hartwell walked past the colonel without looking at him. He took the seat to my right at the side table. He looked up at me. His face changed. The warmth came back. He spoke in the same low voice, but now it was the voice he used with people who had earned it. "Admiral Hendrick," he said, "when you are ready." I lifted my eyes from the note cards. I looked at the press. The lead reporter in the second row, a woman from the Associated Press named Diane Lozada, was looking at me with a very small, very careful smile. I began the briefing on schedule. The briefing went 42 minutes. I answered 6 prepared questions, and 3 I had not anticipated. The cable producer asked a follow-up about a carrier strike group I could not answer in unclassified terms and politely deferred. The defense trade reporter asked a question about congressional funding. I answered with the precision of a person who had memorized the Pentagon's defensive talking points and not bothered to memorize the offensive ones. Colonel Halloran stood against the back wall the entire time. He did not move. He did not leave. I do not know why. I did not look at him. I did not need to. The press did not look at him either. The Secretary of Defense at the side table, his hands folded on the green felt, watched me brief. When I finished, he stood, thanked the press, and walked off the small briefing stage. He did not look at Halloran on the way out. By the time I reached my office, the clip was already trending on a defense press account. By dinner, 3 reporters had called my assistant for comment. I did not return their calls. The first conversation I had after the briefing was in the Secretary's outer office. At 1500 hours. Hartwell sat down at his desk. He took off his glasses. He polished them on his tie. He put them back on. He looked up at me. "Admiral," he said, "I owe you an apology. He should not have been in that room without knowing who you were. That is on my staff. That is not on you." "Mr. Secretary," I said, "I would rather you did not apologize. I would rather you let me brief tomorrow's session as well." "Done." He looked at his chief of staff, a woman named Lillian Vogel, who had been his chief of staff for 3 secretaries running. Lillian, who had a thin face and a thin smile, said, "Sir, Colonel Halloran has requested a meeting with you. He is downstairs." "He can request it through personnel," Hartwell said. "I am not seeing him today." He looked back at me. "Admiral, go to your office, drink water, eat something. We will talk in the morning." I went to my office. Reagan closed the door behind us. The office had a model of the destroyer I had commanded out of Yokosuka on the bookshelf. It had a framed photograph of my mother on my desk. It did not have a photograph of my father. I took off my uniform coat. I hung it on the back of the door. I sat at my desk. I did not cry. I did not laugh. I looked at the ceiling for a long time. "Ma'am," Reagan said after a minute, "I have to say it. You handled that the only way it could have been handled." "I did not handle anything, Reagan," I said. "The Secretary of Defense handled it. I held a note card. Ma'am, you did not move." I considered this. She was right, in a way I had not quite identified yet. At 16:30 hours, I called my mentor. Her name was Cassandra Wexler. She was 68, a retired vice admiral. She had been my destroyer squadron commodore in 2003, when I was a brand new lieutenant junior grade aboard the USS Bulkley in the Persian Gulf. She had stayed in my life for 22 years. She had given me the most used piece of advice I had ever received in the Navy. "Lisa, walk into the room. Do not announce that you walked into the room. Let them notice you." I had been doing that for 22 years. She picked up on the second ring. "Lisa," she said, "I just watched the clip." "It is out already?" 3 of them. The one with the secretary pointing is going around the Pentagon press corps right now. "Are you all right?" "I am fine, Cass. I am angrier than I expected to be." "Good. You should be." "What do I do?" "Nothing. You delivered the brief. The secretary defended his admiral. The colonel is going to discover the cost of his assumptions in slow motion over the next 6 weeks. You do not have to do a thing." "I want to say something to him. To the colonel." "Do not. The lesson is louder if you say nothing. Trust me." I trusted her. Reagan came back into the office at 1700 hours with a leather folder. She had been on the phone with the Joint Staff Personnel Office. She stood at the front of my desk. "Ma'am, Colonel Halloran has been removed from the briefing room floor. He has been reassigned, effective tomorrow, to the Office of Senate Liaison. It is not a demotion on paper, but everyone in this building knows what it is." Reagan, "Ma'am, I did not ask anyone for that. Ma'am, the secretary did. I had spent 27 years building a career so that I would not need anyone to defend me. The moment had come when someone defended me anyway. I did not know what to do with it. My driver took me home along the GW Parkway. The river was gray, the cherry trees were 3 months past bloom. I called my mother from the back of the sedan. "Lisa, sweetie," she said, "are you all right? I saw something on the news." "I am fine, Mom. Your father saw it too." "Did he?" "He did not say anything. He never does. Good night, Mom." I hung up. I went to my apartment. I stood at the window in stocking feet for a long time. I did not eat. I was not hungry. I slept very well. In the days that followed, I made a quiet decision. I did not announce it. I did not write a manifesto about it. I sat at my desk on the Wednesday morning after the briefing, and I wrote a list on a yellow legal pad. The list had 3 items. 1. I would not pretend that the past 3 decades had been what he said they were. 2. I would not attend events at which he could introduce me as someone I was not. 3. He could come find me. I would not go find him. I underlined the third one twice. I folded the page in half. I put it in the bottom drawer of my desk. The list was not a manifesto. The list was a permission slip. I had been waiting to give it to myself for 30 years. I had not understood until that afternoon at the podium that I had the authority to give it. That night, at my kitchen table at my apartment in Arlington, I drafted a letter. It was 1 page. It was not angry. It was not accusatory. It was as careful a letter as I had ever written. I will not summarize it for you. I will simply tell you that the letter said, "I will not be at Thanksgiving this year. I will not be at Christmas. If you would like to see me, you can come to Washington, and I will be glad to host you. I love you both. Lisa." I signed it. I put it in an envelope. I addressed it to my parents. I walked it the next morning to a blue collection box at the corner of 23rd Street and M Street Northwest, and I dropped it in. There was no version of that letter I had not written in my head 1,000 times. The only difference this time was the stamp. 3 days later, my cell phone rang in the middle of a meeting with the Joint Chiefs. The screen on the table beside me said, "Dad." I let it go to voicemail. He called again 40 minutes later. I let it go to voicemail again. I listened to both messages on the drive home. The first was 2 seconds of static and a man clearing his throat. The second was 23 seconds long. He said, "Lisa, it's your father. Your mother showed me the letter. We need to talk. Call me back." He did not say please. He did not say I love you. He said it the way a Marine colonel ends an order to a junior officer. I did not call him back. I called my mother. She had been crying. I could tell. She did not let on. She said, "He's hurt, honey. He is really hurt." "I know, Mom. Won't you call him?" "Mom, he is calling because he wants me to take the letter back." "I am not going to." She was quiet for a long moment. She had spent 49 years finding ways to soften the spaces between my father and me. She did not know any other way to be in the family. "Mom," I said, "I love you. I am not angry at you. I am asking you not to be the messenger this time." "All right, Lisa," she said. She did not say she would actually do it. 2 weeks later, my father drove the 43 miles from my parents' house outside Quantico, Virginia, to my apartment in Arlington, unannounced. He stood in the lobby at 2100 hours on a Wednesday in mid-September. The night doorman called up. "Admiral, there is a Colonel Hendrick downstairs to see you." "Send him up." I was in jeans and a navy sweatshirt. I had been reading the next morning's briefing memo in my armchair. I went to the door. I let him in. He looked at the apartment. He looked at the photographs on the mantel. There were 4 of them. None of them were of him. "Lisa, Dad, I would like to sit down." "Sit down." He sat on the couch. He did not take off his coat. He put his hands on his knees. "I do not understand the letter," he said. I sat in the armchair across from him. "I do not understand why you would do this to your mother." "I did not do anything to Mom," I said. "I wrote the letter to you." "You wrote it to both of us." "I addressed it to both of you." "I wrote it to you." He looked at the floor for a long time. "Lisa," he said, "I have always been proud of you." I let that sentence sit in the room for a moment. The grandfather clock in the corner of my apartment ticked twice. "Dad," I said, 2 weeks ago, you introduced me at your anniversary to a half dozen of your old Marine buddies as the daughter who works in a Pentagon office. I am the senior naval advisor to the Secretary of Defense. I command 3,000 people through the Indo-Pacific Strategy Office. I briefed the President of the United States. I have done that 15 times since January. He did not say anything. I did not write the letter to hurt Mom, I said. I wrote it because I am 48 years old. I am about to be 49, and I am tired of being smaller than I am so that you can feel taller than you are. He looked at his hands. He stayed for 10 more minutes. He did not apologize. He did not say I was wrong. He did not say I was right. He looked at the photographs on the mantel a second time, more slowly, as if he were looking for himself in them. He did not find himself in them. At the door, he hugged me. Badly. The way a Marine colonel of his generation hugged an adult daughter who had finally said the sentence she had been carrying for 30 years. He went out. I closed the door behind him. I stood at the door for a long time with my hand on the knob. I did not cry. I had thought for years that the day I finally said this to him would be the day I cried. It was not. The thing in me that had been waiting to cry had already done it, somewhere. Quietly, over years. He had come. That was something. He had not apologized. That was also something. I had said what I had needed to say. I had been ready to say it for 30 years. That was the only part of the night that surprised me. I went into the kitchen. I drank a glass of water at the sink. I went to bed. I slept well. 3 weeks after the briefing, Colonel Roland Halloran arrived at his new office in the Russell Senate Office Building on Capitol Hill. The Office of Senate Liaison occupied a suite on the 3rd floor with a single window that looked into an air shaft. The view was, by Capitol Hill standards, not unusual. The job was, by Pentagon standards, a job from which no one had recovered in 20 years. I didn't see him. I was not following him. I did not need to. The Pentagon, as my mentor had told me on the phone the day of the briefing, did not have to formally punish a senior officer to end his career. The Pentagon could simply stop including him in the meetings that mattered. By the end of October, Colonel Halloran would understand he was finished. By the end of November, he would file his retirement papers. He would not be promoted to Brigadier General, which had been on the table the week before the briefing. He would not be invited to the change of command ceremonies he had been invited to for 20 years. He would simply have been moved 1 inch out of frame, and the frame had moved on without him. I knew about all of this through Reagan, who had a friend in the Joint Staff Personnel Office. Reagan did not bring it up to gloat. Reagan brought it up because she was, in her quiet way, ensuring that I knew the consequences had landed. I did not feel sorry for Colonel Halloran. I did not feel triumphant about him. I felt, when I thought about him at all, the way a person feels about a thunderstorm she has watched from her front porch. He had been a force. He had passed. What I had not anticipated that autumn was my brother. Sebastian appeared at the door of my office in early October. He was in Service Charlie's, the Marine Corps' khaki, short-sleeved working uniform, with his rank insignia of lieutenant colonel on his collar. He had driven up from Quantico. He had not called ahead. Reagan looked at me. I nodded. He came in. He sat down without being asked. He set his cover on his knee. He ran a hand over his face. He looked tired in a way I had not seen him look before. Lisa, Mom showed me the letter. I know. Dad is a mess. I am sorry to hear it. Are you? I considered the question. He was watching me. Honestly, Sebastian, not really. He was a mess before the letter, too. He was just not admitting it. Sebastian looked at the model of the destroyer on my bookshelf. He looked at the photograph of our mother on my desk. He looked at the 2 stars on my shoulder boards. He had been seeing me in uniform, on and off, for 26 years. He had never really looked at the insignia. 2 stars. 2 stars. He looked at his hands. Lisa, I want to say something. I think I have been part of the problem. Sebastian, I am not interested in a confession. It is not a confession. It is a piece of information. Dad told me my entire childhood that you were the smart one. He told me at OCS. He told me when I got my first command. He just never told you. I looked at him for a long time. Why didn't he tell me? Because he was scared of you, Lisa. Of me. Lisa, you were the kid who did not need him. He never knew what to do with that. He still does not. I did not have a sentence ready for that. I had been certain about my brother for 48 years. I had been certain about my father for the same period. The certainty had been the architecture of my interior life. Sebastian had just very quietly started to pull one wall out. We sat in the office in silence for a long minute. "I have a meeting at 1100 hours, I said. "Are you free Saturday for coffee?" "I will drive up." He stood. He picked up his cover. He paused at the door. "Lisa, for what it is worth, I am proud of you. I should have said that 30 years ago." He went out. That Saturday, he drove up. We met at a coffee shop in Crystal City, 2 blocks from my apartment. He was in civilian clothes for the first time in months, a pair of jeans, a Marine Corps marathon t-shirt from 2015, a baseball cap. He looked like a 40-something man on a Saturday. He did not look like an officer. We sat in a corner booth. He bought the coffee. He started to talk. He told me things about our father I had never heard. He told me about a Marine Corps friend of our father's who had died in the Marine barracks bombing in Lebanon in 1983, and the survivor's guilt our father had carried for 42 years. He told me about a disciplinary letter our father had received as a major in 1989 that had nearly ended his career. He told me about the way our father had cried at Sebastian's commissioning. He was not making excuses. He was just giving me information. I did not interrupt. When he was done, he said, "I am not asking you to forgive him, Lisa. I am just telling you that the man you are angry at is more complicated than the man I have been letting you think you were dealing with. I know that. I am not sure you do. I considered this for a long moment. Maybe I do not. Maybe you and I can be different. I think we can try." We talked for 3 hours. I had not had a 3-hour conversation with my brother in 20 years. By the time we left the coffee shop, the afternoon light was changing color. I walked home along the Crystal City pedestrian street. I did not take the metro. I needed the air. I had spent 48 years being certain about my brother. 3 hours of coffee had made me uncertain. In the weeks that followed, the family began to feel different. It did not feel healed. It felt reformed. There is a difference. A wound that has been reformed is not the same as a wound that has been closed. It is, however, a wound that has settled into a new shape, one the body can carry without limping. My mother began to call without an agenda. This was new. For my entire life, my mother had called when she needed something for the family. The calls had been errands. I had loved her, and I had taken the calls, but I had not, in any meaningful sense, talked to my mother on the phone since I was a child. She called me on a Tuesday evening in mid-January of 2026. It was 8 o'clock my time. "Honey, I was making tea and I was thinking about that summer when you were 10 and we made shortbread together. Do you remember that?" I did remember. I remembered the recipe card, in her handwriting, with the corner browned by butter. I remembered measuring flour with a coffee mug because we did not have a measuring cup. I remember, Mom. I don't think I tell you enough that you were a good kid to be a mother to. I was sitting in my armchair in my apartment with a glass of red wine on the side table. I was 48 years old. I had been on the cover of a Navy public affairs magazine 4 times. I had not been told by my mother that I had been a good kid to be a mother to. Mom, I am just calling to say it, honey. You do not have to do anything with it. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long minute after we hung up. My mother had been waiting for permission to tell me the truth about my childhood for 40 years. She had not understood that the permission was hers to give. Sebastian came for dinner at my apartment on a Saturday in February. He brought a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon and a printed photograph he had asked our mother to find. He spread the photograph on the kitchen counter while I poured the wine. The photograph was from his commissioning ceremony at Officer Candidate School in Quantico, Virginia, in May of 2005. He was in the foreground in dress blues, the second lieutenant's gold bars freshly pinned. Our parents were behind him. Our father had his hand on Sebastian's shoulder. Next to them was an empty chair. That seat was supposed to be yours. Mom saved it for you. She kept telling everybody you might still make it. I looked at the photograph. I asked her for it last week. I wanted you to have it. He handed it to me. I put it on the mantel next to the other 4 photographs. I stepped back and looked at the 5 of them. 5, I said. 5, he said. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff called me the following Wednesday on my direct line. The chairman was a 4-star Marine general who had been a Marine for 41 years. Admiral Hendrick, I am going to say something I rarely say. Your handling of the colonel was the cleanest thing I have watched come out of the briefing room in 2 years. The secretary asked me to convey to you that he intends to recommend you for the next vacancy on the joint staff. Sir, thank you. I am not sure I want it. Take a week. Think about it. I told him you would say that. I had been offered a job I would have killed for at 35. At 48, I was being asked if I wanted it. The answer was not obvious. That, in itself, was new. My father drove up to my apartment a second time in early March, 2 weeks after my 49th birthday. He called first this time. He asked if he could come see me. I said yes. He came in. He sat in the same chair he had sat in September. He did not take off his coat. He looked at his hands for a long time. I do not know how to do this. I know you do not, Dad. I'm not going to say what your brother told me you wanted me to say. I do not think I have it in me. I waited. But I watched the clip. I have watched it 4 times. The Secretary of Defense said, "She is my Admiral." That is a thing I never thought I would hear about a child of mine. I wanted you to know I had heard it. It was not the apology I had wanted at 20. It was, possibly, the apology I could accept at 49. It was a Marine Corps colonel of the old school acknowledging, without language, that a fact in the world was larger than the story he had been telling himself for 30 years. Thank you for driving up, Dad. He nodded. He did not stand. He sat in the chair for a few more minutes. He looked at the photograph of Sebastian's commissioning on the mantel. He recognized the empty chair next to himself in the photograph. He did not say anything about it. He saw it. He drove back to Quantico at 2200 hours. My parents came for a long weekend in late March. They stayed at a hotel near my apartment. Sebastian drove up. The 4 of us ate at the small table in my dining nook on the Saturday night. My mother had made a pot roast at the hotel kitchenette and brought it over. My father sat across from me in shirt sleeves. He had aged in some way I could not name since the previous September. He looked smaller. He looked less like a colonel and more like a man who had been a colonel and was no longer one. He did not introduce me to anyone. There was no one to introduce me to. There was the table and the 4 of us and my mother's pot roast. We talked about Sebastian's son's school. We talked about the cherry trees outside Quantico. We talked about a bill my father had heard about on cable news regarding veterans' health care. We did not talk about the briefing. We did not need to. He looked at me once across the table, with something close to recognition. I nodded. He nodded back. Recognition is a smaller thing than approval. But on a Saturday night, at a dining table in Arlington, recognition turned out to be enough. The job offer on the joint staff did not come up again for 2 months. Hartwell did not push it. The chairman did not push it. They were giving me space to think. I took the space. By April of 2026, I had built a sense of what my next 2 years were going to be, and I had built it without referring my decisions to anyone in my family. This was, in itself, a new thing. I had spent most of my career secretly orienting my career to the silent question of what my father would think if he knew. I had pretended I was not doing this. I had been doing this. I now stopped doing this. The professional clarity that followed the cessation was disorienting. It was also good. I told the secretary in mid-April that I would stay where I was for the rest of his time in office. He nodded. All right, Admiral, I would not have chosen anyone else. My aide, Major Reagan Thatcher, was due to rotate to her own command in November of 2026. She had earned it. She would take a Marine Corps battalion at Camp Lejeune. I needed to choose her replacement. I had 3 candidates on my desk. Reagan had assembled the folder. There were 2 Marine officers, both men, both excellent, both safe. There was a 3rd candidate, a U.S. Navy lieutenant, a woman, a surface warfare officer. Her name was Marisol Diaz. She was 28 years old. She had 2 destroyer department head tours. She had finished number 1 in her class at the destroyer department head course at Newport. She had commissioned through the Reserve Officers Training Corps program at Texas A&M. She was on paper the same officer I had been at her age. 15 years behind me, I had been mentored exactly once in my career, by Cassandra Wexler, on the bridge of a destroyer in the Persian Gulf in 2003. The entire arc of my career was her work as much as mine. I had not paid that debt back. I had not even tried. Lieutenant Diaz was the first installment. I interviewed her on a Thursday afternoon in late April. She came in service khakis. She sat at attention until I told her not to. Lieutenant, what does your family say about your career? She considered the question. She was careful. I liked that. My father does not really understand it, ma'am. He thinks I should have gone to law school. Does that bother you? She paused. It used to, ma'am. It has gotten easier. I looked at her for a long moment across the desk. Lieutenant, you are going to be my flag aide. Report on the 1st of November. Welcome to the staff. Her eyes widened. She managed. Thank you, ma'am. She did not cry. I liked that too. That night I stayed late at the desk. The office was empty. I sat with the formal personnel order in front of me. I signed it in black ink. I slid it into the routing folder. I turned off my desk lamp. I had not been a mentor by temperament. I had been mentored once, by accident, by a woman who saw something in me. I had not paid it back for 22 years. I would start now. The starting was small. The starting was a single lieutenant from El Paso, Texas. It was, however, the starting. The phone call from my father came at 2000 hours on a Tuesday in early May. I was heating up leftover Thai food in my kitchen. My phone was on the counter. The screen said, "Deed." I picked up. Lisa, it is your father. Hi, Dad. He paused. He took a long breath. I was at the VFW today. They had the cable channel on. They were showing the briefing replay, the one from August. They did not know I was your father. They were watching you brief the press on the Indo-Pacific posture. The man next to me, Earl, he is a Vietnam Marine. He has been a friend of mine for 40 years. He said, "That Admiral is sharp." I stood at my kitchen counter with the microwave still running behind me. I said, "Earl," I said, "that Admiral is my daughter." I did not say anything. The microwave dinged. I did not move. "I just wanted you to know." That is what I said. It was the simplest sentence my father had ever spoken to me. There was no embroidery, there was no qualifier, there was no comparison to my brother. There was no version of the sentence in which he was somehow the protagonist. There was only the sentence. "Dad, thank you for telling me." "Okay, I will let you go. Your mother says hi." We hung up. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The microwave was still beeping. I did not move. 30 years, that had been 30 years coming. A sentence in the lounge of a VFW post in Central Virginia to a Vietnam Marine named Earl. That Admiral is my daughter. I could feel in real time my chest reorganize around it. I went to the window. The Pentagon was lit. The river was dark. The night was cold for May. The cherry trees along the GW Parkway had already lost their blossoms. I had not noticed them this year. I had been busy. They would come back next April. I would notice them then. I leaned my forehead against the window pane. I did not cry. I was not euphoric. I was calm. The thing I had been waiting for 30 years, had been said. I had not needed it in order to do my job. I had not needed it in order to be who I was. But I had wanted it, and now I had it. The wanting was, I realized, the thing I had been ashamed of. The having of it dissolved the shame. I had spent 30 years pretending I had not wanted it. The pretending had been the heaviest part. The wanting itself, it turned out, had never been the problem. I went back to the kitchen. I took the food out of the microwave. I ate at the counter standing up. I poured a small glass of red wine. I drank half of it. I went to bed. I slept very well. Lieutenant Diaz reported 2 days early. She arrived at the door of my outer office on a Tuesday morning at 0730 hours, in service khakis, with a brown leather briefcase that was a little too new. Reagan walked her in. I had been on the phone with the Deputy Chief of Staff. I ended the call. I stood up from my desk. A flag officer does not, by tradition, stand up from her desk when a lieutenant enters. The lieutenant stands at attention, says, "Good morning, ma'am," and sits when invited. The choreography is 250 years old. I stood up anyway. I came around the side of the desk. I offered my hand. "Lieutenant Diaz, welcome." "Ma'am, thank you." I looked at her. She looked small in the doorway, the way I had looked small in doorways for 25 years. "Sit down," Reagan is going to walk you through the office. Then she is going to teach you everything she has learned in 18 months. Then she is going to leave for her command in November, and you are going to be on your own. You are going to make mistakes. I am going to make sure you survive them. The job is not impossible. But it is hard. Are you ready? Yes, ma'am. Good. Welcome to the staff. At 10 o'clock that morning, I walked her down the E-ring corridor to introduce her to the Deputy Chief of Staff. We walked past the photographs of every Secretary of Defense since Forrestal. We walked past the portrait outside the Pentagon Athletic Club. We walked past the office of the Director of Cost Assessment, who waved through the glass. Diaz was taking in the building the way I had taken it in once, 25 years before. The way the corridors of the E-ring made you feel both very small and very part of something. I slowed my pace so she could look. I had walked these corridors for a long time before I had stopped feeling like an intruder in them. I wanted her not to have to walk them as long. That was perhaps the small, useful thing I could do. At the same hour, 26 miles south of the Pentagon, my father sat in a leather armchair in the day room of a retirement community in Stafford, Virginia. He had a coffee. The television above the room's fireplace was on. A defense industry cable channel was replaying the press briefing from the previous August. I was at the podium. The Secretary of Defense was at the side table. The clip cut to the moment Hartwell pointed. The closed captioning read, "She's my Admiral." My father watched it without moving. The man in the chair next to him, a retired Air Force Master Sergeant named George, who had been at Khe Sanh in 1968 and was now 81, said, "Hell of a briefing, Max." My father said, without taking his eyes off the television, "That is my daughter, George." George said, "No kidding." My father said, "No kidding." He had said it once before, to a man at the VFW named Earl. He would say it now, to a man in the day room named George. Next week he would say it to a man at the barber shop named Dwight. Next month he would say it without prompting to himself, while shaving. It would take him about 6 weeks to say it without surprise. I would not be there to hear most of those times. That, it turned out, was all right. At lunchtime, Reagan brought me a turkey sandwich. I was editing the next morning's briefing memo. My mother had texted me a picture of the cherry tree in front of the family home outside Quantico, which was, even out of season, preparing for next April. The text read, "Just wanted you to see this." I replied, "Thanks, Mom. Pretty." I put the phone down. Reagan paused at the door on her way out. "Ma'am, I never asked. Are you doing all right?" I thought about this for a moment. I actually thought about it. "Reagan, I am doing extremely well. Thank you for asking." "Ma'am." She went out. I ate half the sandwich. I went back to the brief. At 17:30 hours, the May afternoon was going to gray. I packed my work into my brief bag. I turned off my desk lamp. I walked past Diaz's new desk in the outer office. I nodded at the watch officer. I rode the elevator down to the river entrance. My driver was waiting at the curb in a black government sedan. I got in the back. The driver, a polite man from a small town in Maryland whose name was Curtis, said, "Evening, Admiral." "Evening, Curtis." We took the GW Parkway north. The Potomac was gray. The river was ordinary. The Washington Monument across the water was lit. The Lincoln Memorial was lit. The bridges were going on, one by one, as the light went. I thought of nothing in particular. I had imagined when I was 20 that getting what I had wanted would feel like a kind of fireworks. It did not feel like fireworks. It felt like driving home in Maylight in the back of a sedan, with the work of the day put down. It felt like a Tuesday. I had not expected a Tuesday. I am very, very glad I got one. We crossed the Memorial Bridge. The Lincoln Memorial was on the left. The river was below. The city was ahead. I sat in the back seat with my hands folded in my lap. The lights of the Kennedy Center came up to the north. The lights along the parkway came on. The cherry trees along the river, blossomless now in May, would come back next year. I would still be here. I would still be the senior naval advisor. I would still be working the brief. But something in me had changed. Not because a man had pointed at me in a briefing room. It had changed because in the months that followed, I had stopped being smaller than I was so that my father could feel taller than he was. I had been ready to do that for 30 years. I had done it finally at 49 on a Wednesday morning at a kitchen table in Arlington with a one-page letter and a stamp. If anyone watching this is waiting for someone to finally see you, I hope they do. And if they do not, I hope you find, the way I did, that the waiting was the only thing that was ever in your way. If you've ever stood somewhere your family didn't think you belonged or built something they refused to look at, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Have you ever had someone reach for your arm without ever once looking at your rank? Have you ever decided finally to stop being smaller than you were so someone else could feel taller than they were? If this one hit you the way it hit me, hit subscribe. Thanks for listening.